of the new morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the world.
Gentlemen, welcome to the CCAR Peer Support Learning Collaborative, where we talk about performance support. I'm George Brott. I'll be leading the discussion this morning and look forward to engaging your ideas and really making this a productive hour for us. So let's start as we typically do, or as I typically do, by just taking a moment to be silent and still. And I suggest you start this by giving yourself an affirmation for the unique value and worth that you bring to our community. There's nobody else that has the talents and the skills and the abilities that you do. Not exactly, at least. So, after that, after you've given yourself an affirmation, I suggest maybe expressing gratitude to the elders and the ancients who paved the way for you, who made the life that you enjoy today possible. Maybe even going all the way back to the First Nations people who took such good care of Mother Earth that we're able to enjoy the beauty and the bounty that exists all around us today. In my case, that would be here in Georgia, that would be, well, depending on where you live, it could be the Creeks or the Muskogee or the Cherokees or the Seminoles. So let's just take a moment to be silent and still.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence.
Thank you. I don't know what came up for you in that last minute. I just expect something did. It always does for me. And I really appreciate this quote from George Eliot, who says, if we had a keen vision of all that's ordinary in human life, it would be like hearing the grass grow, the squirrel's heartbeat, and we should die of that roar, which is the other side of silence. Now, I don't think she meant really die. I think she was referring to becoming so familiar with it that we recognize that that part of us is always present. That other side of silence is in everything, it's in all things, it's in all humans. And so it's about, for me, the ability to tap into that, both within myself. There's times when I go there in order to rejoice and celebrate, and then there's other times where that may be the only place I find solace and understanding. Um, and so, if it's in me, I kind of think it's in you as well. And the challenge of doing peer services is, can we connect to that part, that other side of silence in the peers that we want to work with? And I'm talking about our colleagues as well as the people who come to us for service. And fundamentally, my side of silence, my other side of silence, is what gets in my way sometimes. And so it's about that process of checking in and recognizing the value, not just of what's in my experience, but that's in the experience that I've inherited from my ancients and my elders, and being able to assist others in tapping into that same strength and resource.
But like a compass seeking north, there lives in me a still, sure spirit heart. Clouds of doubt are cut asunder by the lightning and the thunder, shining from the compass of my heart.
So let's jump in. So I want to go over a few engagement guidelines. I appreciate everybody turning on your cameras, and I see you figured out the mute button as well. That's you're spot on. So I want to suggest that multitasking based upon research is not productive, respectful, or healthy. So I invite you to bring all of yourself into our interaction and sustain your focus and your attention on what we're doing here. To create a sense of an engaged community, of course, you've got on your camera and you've unmuted, except when there's conversations or distractions that will occur in your environment. If you promise not to check your email or you instant twit face, etc., while we're here, I promise not to waste your time. If you agree to look us in the eye and try to absorb what we're saying, I agree to be crisp, cogent, and on point. If you can encourage me and bring enthusiasm to our interaction, I can lean in to understand your perspective and reflect even more energy on what you're contributing. And the purpose of this meeting is not to fill the allocated time or to get continuing education credits or whatever. Our purpose is really to communicate ideas and the associated emotions and to find out what could be better via engaged conversations or using an approach called appreciative inquiry. So, what else would help make this a more safe and respectful place to maximize your engagement and learning today? What suggestions do you have? Okay.
Hi, everybody. My name's Erin. Sorry I hopped in a little bit late, so thank you for letting me join. Um, I'm a visual and auditory learner, so I love seeing what you have on the screen, but sometimes I like hearing something repeated, especially if it's really important. Would that be
Sure.
possible?
So repeat important topics. Does that capture?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Hi, George.
Hey, Nathan. How do you pronounce your first
I've, I've got a little. My daughter and I are in the same house. Can you take her mic? Hold on. I'm just. There we go. She's muted her, so now I don't have five of me. I guess for me, it's just also getting some feedback from other people because all of y'all are on the other side of the world to us, and so a lot of this is kind of new, and we're learning how to explain things that seem to come naturally to people who've been in recovery coach communities.
I'm writing so it really is important for you to get the perspective of others. So you're in England, I believe, UK.
Oh, yeah, we're in the
And
UK.
so part of the challenge is being able to figure out how to effectively explain things to peers who may be and are from a different culture.
I still very much get asked if we rescue coaches off the side of the motorway.
Yeah. And what's your answer?
That is what they think a recovery coach is. So, yeah.
Good. So, but you'd appreciate that feedback. Good.
Yeah.
What else? Or anything else?
Let's just use this one to talk in.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Good. Let's just do a round robin check in.
Question before we begin.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So my computer had like a big glitcho problem and they had to do an update on it. And I cannot find that sheet that you sent the very first day of class that had like all of the resources and then that one link where there had the sheet where they were tracking progress, like in your individuals, your groups, and all that good stuff.
Yes.
Would you be able to post that again, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I probably can. Let's see how this works. See if you can click on that link that's in chat. It should pop up the document we're about to go to. Did it work? You're welcome.
It
Thanks
worked.
for
Thank you.
asking. Nice. All right. So I just learned how to use the raised hand or see the raised hand. So appreciate that. All right. So what I want to just do a quick round robin check in. And if you would tell us your name, where you are, and what color most currently describes your current emotional state. And it can be anything from yellow, I've got a really heightened sense of alertness. There's perhaps an elevated sense of frustration or anxiety. Maybe you're green, you're calm, you're alert, you're happy, or you're content, or you're focused and you're ready to learn. Blue would be I'm kind of low energy, low alertness, maybe a little fatigued, I'm bored, I'm sad, I'm sick. Green would be, gray would be I don't know how I'm feeling. Purple would be I'm just roaring and ready to go. I'm so excited, I'm happy, I have an intense feeling of elation or euphoria. And red would be I'm just a little bit out of control and I'm really kind of struggling right now with either anger or fear or devastation or terror. So if you don't mind, just take a second and unmute and tell us who you are, where you are, and what color you are. Who'd like to go first? Who'd like to go first?
We've decided to join on one camera.
Very good.
The echoey stuff.
Your other machine muted.
So
Your other machine muted.
YouTube. No.
I think so.
Okay. Try it and see. Now you're muted and we can't hear you. There we go.
Right. Here we go. I'm Nita. I'm in England with my daughter. We are the first C-Car recovery coach trainers in the UK and the first recovery coach professionals in the UK. So I guess based on that, I'd say I'm probably red, but I don't have anger, rage, devastation, or terror. I'm just, whoa, things are moving really fast. It's a bit out of control. I need to get some management of things going on. Lots of interest, lots of inquiries, lots of questions, and just kind of, I feel like I need a bit of a step back, reset. How do I do this most effectively?
Okay.
I'll go. My name's Khalees. I'm the daughter. I'm also everything she said as well. It's funny that she said red because I was like, okay, I'm not going to say red because I'm not angry, but I chose yellow because I think it's more just overwhelm.
So Khalees, you're not quite as intense in the emotion you're feeling, but it's that sense of what am I doing? How do I move forward? And just overwhelmed by the task that you see ahead of you.
Yes, that's definitely something we've been discussing a lot is systems, processes, trying to get organized. And so, yeah, it is just a lot of overwhelm.
Your first training that you're going to facilitate is scheduled for when?
No. We've just finished training number 6. We are about to hit 100 people trained in the UK next week.
Yeah.
So,
Very
yeah.
Nice.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for being here. Who next?
So my name is Erin, and I've just been blessed with the new role of really getting into my coordinator role. Before I was kind of in it a little bit, but still really engaged with peer services and running groups and training and stuff. So now I'm really excited to get into this role full force. So I'm green with some red and yellow. I'm mostly green, but I'm just the same thing with the ladies. Confusion, how do you put all this stuff together? Really, how do you start studying the data, collecting it really? Especially when it's coming from a few different people. How do you organize everything and then staying on track to keep that flow going to really get to the end result, which is person-centered peer services. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Thank you. So it really is still trying to figure out, particularly the metrics and the performance indicators. How do you get people kind of on the same page?
Yep, we're all over the place. So it's getting that, the model that we want to really all start following and just putting it all together.
And that's the funny thing about numbers. People will show numbers and they may not even represent the same things. But we'll get into that in just a little bit.
Right. And then what I think is important, they may not think is important. You know what I mean? So it's perception too, is what are we really trying, what's the end result here?
Let's see. How about Robert? You want to go next? Yes, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you can. Okay. I think I'm actually a little blue today. My name is Robert, and I'm on Martha's Vineyard. I'm with Martha's Vineyard Community Services, and we're also at the end of tree pollen season, and I feel like I have a very heavy duvet covering me. It's like having a difficult time breathing, and so I'm sneezing a lot. And on top of that, we've had, this is my third year as supervisor of the Recovery Coach program. And last year we had a spike in number of clients in May. And we had sort of attributed that to COVID. But now I'm seeing it might have more to do with, we're sort of ramping up our tourist season here. And it causes a great deal of stress on the people who live here. So we've gone in the past 2 weeks from roughly 51 clients to 78. And there are only 8 coaches, so we're all feeling a little stressed. But also, I mean, everyone's stepping up their game, and it's quite good. I've been, sending a lot of referrals for detox beds and treatment facilities, and so it's. It's spending the evening really remembering to take care of myself and to detach in a way from the emotions of the day. And that's going well, but with the tree pollen, it makes it just a little bit more difficult. So in the best of circumstances, it would be stressful. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Very nice. Thank you, sir. You're welcome.
And last but not least.
Hello, I'm Elon. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. And I am the founder of Our Jewish Recovery. And I am feeling a little tired. This morning. It's been a long week. But mostly calm with some elevated alertness. I will say, I am happy that we got our first big grant came in yesterday, which we're very happy about. And we've launched a bunch of new meetings this week. So life is good and tiring.
You're tired and the energy is painful.
You're tired and the energy is painful in productive ways.
Khalees. I see you have your hand raised.
Well,
It's actually Bob.
it's me.
So I just wanted to say, based on what Aaron just said, that the data and the thing is really challenging. Because we're coming up to 100 people, we really want to backtrack and get good data to show kind of where we're at. And I've seen things in the UK where one person attended a substance abuse service center as to give feedback as a service user forum, and the report when it came out said 100% of the people attended and engaged. And I was at that event, and I know one person showed up and got all the free biscuits and coffee, and so ticked all the boxes to say it was flipping amazing, and that was submitted for funding to validate what they do. So I don't want to do it that way. I want to be better. I want to really show that we're making an impact in the UK. So yeah, so I kind of, that first week or two of the data stuff, I'm like,
I get it. I need to do it. I need to really understand, but I'm a bit lost still. I'm not sure. I think I just need what's the first 5 things I should definitely capture all the time, or something like the Dummy's Guide to Data Capture.
Yeah.
Oh, unmute yourself, George.
I think you're muted.
I
Yeah.
have to remind myself to unmute and unmute. So the kind of the big challenge I'm hearing across several of you is, how do we organize our data collection, A, so that we're all measuring the same things, and then B, how do we come to some consensus as to what are the most important metrics? And funding sources and others certainly inform what you prioritize. But ultimately, it's sort of, I mean, it really is about, are we able to get better? And can we demonstrate that with the data we're collecting? So that's what performance support is all about. And so it really is us getting together, and it's not that I have the answer. I may have some ideas and some suggestions, but we are the ones that with supporting one another and really reviewing what we're doing and being curious about it, that's the way we improve our ability, our confidence, and our competence to do this work, and to improve the quality of the services, and the outcomes will follow. So you get it. So it really is about how we engage with one another and talk about what's working well to start with, what are the opportunities to improve, and then what keeps us hopeful. We need to spend some time celebrating. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you've got over 100 people that you've trained. And it's important to recognize that, Jan, you have that, you got the grant. My gosh, that's big. And we need to get together in community and celebrate those things just as much as we need to talk about what are the challenges that we're facing. So, having said all that, it's about kind of the 80-20 rule. Anybody ever heard of the Pareto principle? So, typically, in any organization, well, there's a number of ways this gets applied. This came out of economics, actually, but it's 80% of the people in an organization, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people in an organization. That's one way of looking at it. Another way, for example, Microsoft found that 80% of the problems that they were experiencing with their software was due to 20% of the coding errors that were being reported by people who were using the software. So fix a few little things, and it can have dramatic impacts across systems, is kind of the point here. And it really kind of begins with a different question. And that question is, so who's not making progress? Who in your program isn't making progress? And how do people typically tell you they don't like your service or they're not making progress? Well, I suggest it's by not coming back, by not showing up. And so we don't really get that feedback mechanism that's so vital in order to understand how do we do this better. Well, so I'm going to flip over here to our learning community notes, because everything that you see on the screen is actually linked in this document. So the first item here, I'll come back to that in just a second. Our first item here is, what are your key performance measures and deliverables? And that's where this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. But the idea is You need to have some set of mutually agreed upon, if not funder required metrics that everybody agrees on how you define each of those items. And so last time I asked you to put into your spreadsheet, actually this spreadsheet, what are the key metrics that you're actually trying to measure in your program? And these are some of the examples that were given. And I just want to kind of jump down here and focus on some suggested key performance indicators. And obviously, the number one that we've already heard is the number of people on your peer list. Now, an increase from 51 to 78? Holy cow. That's an influx of new people. And how you manage that is something that can be discussed among the service providers. But the key is recognizing, A, that you've had the increase, and then B, I mean, you're making the referrals to the treatment programs and other places. And so how do you take care of your peer service providers who may find themselves being stretched to the max? So it's tying the performance to the metrics that gets us where we want to go. So let's see. Let me pause here and see what comments or questions folks have. Yes,
George? So my internet was lost there for a minute. Can you repeat what you said when we said a number of people, you had an influx? Should we recognize that you had an increase in number of peers? I missed that after.
Yeah, so Robert was talking about there on Martha's Vineyard, they went from I think it was 51 to 78 peers, and that was mostly due to the tourist season and the influx of visitors to their area. And so the challenge there is, A, to obviously recognize that's a big jump. And because you have that data, you can get together with your service providers and talk about what do we do in order to address the significant increase. How do we take care of ourselves and the peers that we're providing services to? Robert, anything else you want to add to that?
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, I mean, I think the metric du jour, or sort of the baseline metric, is how many people are you serving? And here's the question for you. What does that mean? How do you count people as to whether or not they are on your peer load? Well, that kind of moves to this next item, and that is, how many people have you admitted to the program? Now, I apologize, that's clinical language, but it's about how many new people, and I prefer to describe it as how many people have you seen for the very first time? And that can be an important metric. And if you are working with a group, who saw how many of those new people for the first time? My experience is there's some folks who are really, really good at those first interactions, and then there's some folks that maybe aren't necessarily so good at it. How do you know? How do you figure that out? Well, I suggest the way to figure it out is to look at how many of those first interactions actually return for services by service provider. In other words, if I have 10 interactions with new people this month, Jan has 11, Robert has 12, Aaron has 13, what percentage of those actually come back to see somebody in our program within 30 days? And again, it's not that I'm necessarily better at it than somebody else. It could be simply I got the luck of the draw, and the people that I saw were more motivated, or they liked the service, or it was more culturally congruent, or there's lots of reasons for it. But you can use the data to inform the discussions about how do we get better at it. And if over time we find out that, in fact, Erin is the one who's really, really good at these first interactions, that she has the highest percentage of people who come back for a second interaction, then we can pick Erin's brain and say, how are you doing that? Teach us what you're doing so that we can learn from you. So this isn't top-down driven. It's much more of a collaborative, let's all talk about what our strengths and skills and abilities are, and use the data to figure out who's good at what. Make sense? So let me pause and see if anybody has any questions.
Hello, can you hear me? Yep, good. So this is really interesting for me, because kind of thinking about the people that we're engaging with right now, I look at the number of people that have signed up for Recovery Coach Academy training with us, and then the number of people who re-engage and want something else from us. And we've had a couple of students who have had great success and started to get in with an NHS emergency room for the first time. And I want to track the impact that the people that kind of come to us are now having out in their community, because I just think that's really important. And I'd never thought about who they interacted with first between you and I.
Yeah.
And then kind of that measuring, do they re-interact with another
Person
with us? But then how can I measure the impact they're having after the course? Because they are definitely staying in touch with us because they're desperate for resources and ideas and support, but just kind of putting because I think that's how we will be successful, by proving what these brave warriors who believed in recovery coaching on day one are actually impacting. Yeah.
So I apologize. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I got kicked off and now I'm back.
Did you hear me, George?
Probably the last.
Oh, okay. I've never thought about tracking whether they engaged with Khalees or I first, and how that affected the ongoing interactions. I have thought about tracking kind of how soon they come back to us requesting the next CCAR course or the next engagement. But then we've had like one student who's now got NHS tracking numbers to run the first accident and emergency ER program ever in the UK. So just how can I measure that without creating myself 2 days worth of work, to track what our students are doing? And how can I get them to give us that data to say it's going to be used for good? We're not trying to steal your ideas either.
So maybe you have a set of NHS metrics that are required across service providers. Just like for those of you who get a SAMHSA grant, you have to fill out the GIPRA, which is, God forbid, it's an awful, well, I'll hold back on that. But so the idea is you have those standardized metrics that your funders are expecting you to fulfill. And you can begin with that as the baseline set of key performance indicators. And then talk about beyond that, what's relevant to your service providers about the quality and the outcome of your services. So I asked folks to bring a copy of what your key performance indicators or metrics are to today's session. Anybody else have we can talk about the UK set. Anybody else have a set of metrics that they are kind of bound to or have otherwise developed on your own?
I have a separate spreadsheet, but all I really started with is all of the groups that we have, all of our peers, how many individuals they have right now, and how many hours are worked within those groups. So that's like what I've got to start with thus far. My internet's terrible this morning. It keeps freezing for some reason, so I apologize.
It's me, I forgot. So the kind of proverbial question is, what else are you curious to know? What about your program would speak to the quality of the services? And what are the key outcomes that you think are most relevant? And I'm saying you, but this really would be a question for all the service
So I definitely need to add.
Really would be a question.
So I would need to add phase movement. That would be something I'm going to work on next.
Okay.
And then also successes, like you said, and
Lila, I'm not sure quite why I can't share my screen since I came back, but we'll manage without it. If everybody has access to the keynotes document, that's what I'm referring to. And the link to this spreadsheet is in that document. So I don't necessarily have to show it on the screen, I don't think. So yeah, phase movements. And what are you thinking the phases of your program are?
we just added stages of change to our surveys. So what stage of change do you feel you're in?
I would suggest that's different than program phases. In other words, you have an initial phase. Call that orientation. And this is kind of the intake process, to be clinical about it. This is maybe the first month. How do people who are coming into your service learn about your culture? And I'll define culture as this is the way we do things around here. So how often can I come? What are the array of services that I can access? What are the interaction guidelines? And you may even have some rules. And some of those rules are cardinal rules, meaning if you talk about harming yourself or somebody else, we will begin to engage other authorities in protecting you and or our community. And those are just examples. But the idea is, in this orientation phase, people are just learning, how do I play in this sandbox? Now, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's almost, we have to figure out, do I fit in here? Do I belong? And then you might look at, there's a middle phase, and that's the point at which people begin to seriously engage, experience some of the benefits, they begin to wrestle with challenges, and they're in that almost like a growth phase. And then at some point, and I don't know where it is for your program, people cross into what we might call the inner circle, where they become more not the new kid on the block, but more the elder who may be even able to take new people under their wings and serve as mentors. In the 12-step world, this is what is called a sponsor. So you're not staff per se, but you're also not the new kid on the block. And you have an important role to serve within this organization of helping orient new folks, to deliver services and supports to others, because staff obviously are only a tiny percentage of who people interact with in most programs. And then the last phase, so to speak, is how do you say goodbye to people? And I know this can get gut-wrenching, but it's an important reality that ideally people will move into the next phase of their life and perhaps find other recovery supports that are more germane to their culture than coming to your center as the sole source of recovery support. How do I know I'm successful? When I have people who contact me 5-10 years later and say, you know, I really appreciate the fact that I was able to connect with you, and here is what I'm doing now to support my recovery. And it's not that they're dependent on me or my program. They've developed their own recovery network. And so that last phase is about how do you acknowledge people moving into the more mature stages of recovery, you know, that 3 to 5 to 10 year mark. So we can break that out and talk about what we're doing well within each of those phases and who's doing it well based upon the data that we collect. So in the clinical world, that last part of the process is what I refer to not as discharges, because I think that's a terrible way to describe people. People aren't discharges. I mean, if you think about the human body, one of the most, when we have a natural negative reaction to the body's discharges. So why would we call people discharges? Anyway, so I prefer to call them transfers, meaning they're going to transfer to some other recovery support. And they can, you know, they may occasionally pop into ours, but there's two kinds of transfers. One is called a planned transfer. This is what in the clinical world would be referred to as a successful discharge. Fundamentally, it means the person made progress in their recovery goals and they have a plan for what they're going to do next. And as a service provider, it's my job to hook them up with whatever resources I can that they're interested in order to move into transitioning to that other service. Then the other type of transfer is called an unplanned transfer. And you know, stuff happens, life happens, and people will just say, I'm not coming back. If you have a good relationship with the people you're working with, they'll tell you they're not coming back. And you have the opportunity to have that discussion as to why. And it may be they haven't found what they were looking for. It may be that they just aren't satisfied with the service or the connections that they have with your community. It's not your community's fault necessarily. It's just that they prefer chocolate and all you offer is vanilla. So this isn't a value judgment. It's about recognizing people will move on. That's kind of what life is about. And it looks like my picture is frozen, so I don't know if y'all can still hear me or not. Okay, good. I don't know why my picture's frozen. All right, so let me stop here. Comments, questions? Did I jump off a deep end?
I think it's really interesting listening to the things that you say that are important to collect, because I definitely feel like we're trying to change the things, you know, because here, if people go through a drug service, they only collect data for 12 weeks, and then that's considered a successful discharge, and that's it. So there is no long-term data over an extended period of time, which is really about recovery, you know. At the most, the longest I've ever heard anybody recording data here has been 6 months. And it just, now kind of listening to you speak and everything, it's like, God, why aren't we doing this for such an extended period of time and really getting more than attended session, reduced methadone, you know, non-opiate user discharged successfully, because that's kind of all I've been seeing on reports. And it's just, this is really making me think differently and making me feel I need to be brave and challenge more. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Nice. So I'm curious, why do you think?
I think because most of the funding for drug services in the UK come through crime prevention, antisocial behavior, and decriminalization, and they're not about recovery. Yep. It's more about getting people onto a script for medicated assisted treatment, reverse recovery, and being able to show to the local counselors that this many people are now non-opioid street users. So we've made an impact in crime rate, and just so happens shoplifting dropped 2% too, and we did all that successfully. I mean, I was amazed that one of my friends who does quite a lot for advocacy here was at the Scottish Parliament yesterday, and they are actually trying to pass a bill that says people have the right to recovery and the right to rehab, because right now apparently we don't have that right for everybody. And it's just shocking. We literally are 15 years behind.
Well, yeah. Well, but it's the system itself is driven by clinicians. And the point really is the program is the hero. The program is what is celebrated. And what we're doing in the peer world is flipping that on its head and saying, yeah, programs are not irrelevant, but what's most important are people. And the fact that this thing called recovery takes time, it doesn't happen because you go into an acute service. Yes, that's an important piece of the process. So what you're delivering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We had a really interesting discussion because we asked somebody, we got one of the guys from CCAR to come do Facebook Live with us, and we asked him, how long can people access your recovery community? And he said, for a lifetime. And I mean, some of the conversations after that here were just like, how could you offer services for a lifetime? And I said, you're thinking they're going to come in every day or every week. This is not about that. You know, it's just about being a resource for people later on as they have different things happen in their life where they may need a bit of support. And just, yeah, we are having.
I think too, like even in our Recovery Coach Academy training, it's all so new to the UK. Like people will ask, what is a recovery community? You know, it's so new, everything. So we're really having to provide a lot of ongoing support and education.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I like to use the concept of dose. You know, you go and you get a dose. Well, that dose in the traditional acute care behavioral health world is a dose of medicine, a dose of clinical service. Well, in the peer world, we're reframing that dose to mean
That's good.
a dose of connection. And those connections are as the dose of medicine that you're getting. In fact, those doses of connection are what are really going to sustain people beyond the point at which they need your medicine, if that day comes. And so it's that sort of a reframe that helps to drive the metrics to say how much of a dose are people getting when they come to your program and for how long. And by the way, dose actually is a nice mnemonic to remember. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, the neurochemicals that are involved in us feeling good and being motivated.
It's interesting. You're talking our language there because we send out an email newsletter to all of our students, and it's called A Dose of Hope.
Every week, weekly dose of hope.
And we say we give them a dose of hope each week.
Nice.
So, yeah, I'm going to start doing a dose of connection too.
Yeah.
Thank
Well, so that reframe is really, really important. And you can use the data to show the impact that you're having. Well, okay. Well, we've only really got a few more minutes left. One of the key questions I wanted to ask today is, what percentage of the people you provide services to do not improve or deteriorate? And that really is a rhetorical question, but I would encourage you to explore the answer to that question. And the reason is there's been a significant amount of research, a lot of it conducted by Michael Lambert at Brigham Young University, that in fact shows in the clinical world in particular that between 40 to 70% of people who come in for treatment either don't change or deteriorate. And the point really is, if we put in place questions about how are you doing, what ideas do you have about how this experience could be better, we're more likely going to capture people who are either not improving or who are getting worse. But we have to be intentional about asking those questions. And it's different than going to McWaffle Hut and filling out a customer satisfaction survey. But that's the usual frame of reference for this. So, sorry.
Can you repeat that question again, because my internet froze there for a second?
Yes, go ahead.
What percentage of
what percentage of the people you serve do not improve or deteriorate?
Go ahead, make my day.
So I want to kind of wrap up here and say I really do appreciate your attention here today and your participation. Want to invite you to complete a feedback form, feed forward form, I would call it. So tell me what you liked about today, and more importantly, what do you think will make our next Learning Collaborative even better? And there is some homework for next time. If you're coming back for the June 25th, what I'd like to ask you to do is to focus specifically on how do you introduce yourself to somebody who you're meeting for the first time, who has no idea, they can't even spell peer support, much less know what it is. And there's a guide that's in our notes document if you're interested in looking at that. But if you would, come next month ready to introduce yourself to us as if we are peers who don't know anything about peer services. And then I also want to mention June the 2nd is the CCAR webinar on facilitating individual recovery support services. That's at 10 a.m. If you're interested, I invite you to join us and go to that CCAR training website and sign up. So thank you all very, very much, and I look forward to seeing you again next.